IU fans, it's been a minute. Matt and I had to push IU basketball a little bit down on the priority list the last few weeks, but
Mhm.
let's face it. Um, for a team that's pretty much played their way out of the NCAA tournament at large picture, Indiana basketball is a hell of a viewing experience. It really is. You have so many ups and downs. They look half decent at Wisconsin and at Illinois. And then you're like, oh, they're stringing together some good play. They beat Iowa. And of course, we saw Penn State disaster over the weekend. And then it was like, oh my God, are they ever going to win a game? Well, turned things around at halftime against the Buckeyes and found a way to win in Columbus, a tough place for previous renditions of Indiana men's basketball to find a victory. What do Matt and I make of all of this? Is it even worth making something of it? Should we just relish the fact that the Hoosiers won a Big Ten road game and just move on from that? No, we're going to talk a lot about the Hoosiers. We're going to talk about Anthony Leal. We're going to talk about Mike Woodson and so much more here on episode 321 of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. We're recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Wednesday, February 7th, 2024, where I'm your host, Nithin Christian. Here with me tonight is my normal co-host, Matt Lukens. Matt, Indiana's 6-6 in Big Ten play, but this has been far from an average Big Ten basketball season. We've seen really high highs, really low lows. The Hoosiers came back from 18 down to beat Ohio State last night. What do you make of this Indiana men's basketball team now as we have about a month until the Big Ten tournament?
They're an absolute mess, but they're a fun and frustrating mess. That's what they are. Um, they're not a tournament team. I think going into the year, our expectations were what? This team would hopefully compete towards the top of the Big Ten,
Yeah.
would hopefully squeak into the tournament. Um,
Head
I
into the
mean,
field.
I mean, as things stands, to be honest, they were what, one game off of third or fourth in the league. Like they are not that far away from where expectations were at the beginning of the year, as much as people like think the sky is falling. But that being said, they have done themselves no favors in the non-conference, no favors in conference play. They have decided to play their worst portion of basketball in the season against, Purdue and then Penn State. Both looked awful, right? And so this team is just not even just mildly frustrating, extremely frustrating. But at the same time, then have performances like this, or you have the Anthony Leal game, like against Iowa, or I mean by this I mean the Ohio State game, or against Iowa. Like I actually like this team, like their personality. I kind of like the personalities on this team. They
You
just
kind of
don't
in a
work.
soft spot for him.
Yeah, I know. And I think Anthony Leal has done a lot to help that. Um, but that being said, there's still not a good team, right? Like the roster is not great. Especially now you're out Xavier Johnson, maybe for good, right? We don't really know how that is going to unfold there. Um, you've seen growth from a couple of players this year, to be honest. I think Malik Reneau has gone from a guy that was our sixth man last year, seventh
Right.
guy
Yeah.
off the bench, right?
Yeah.
To best player on the team, in my opinion. Um, you've taken a guy from Oregon and Khalil Ware who didn't play at all, and he's become an NBA caliber big man,
Yep.
and he's so much fun to watch. Is he our best player? I don't think
I
so. Is
think
he
it's
our most
Renew.
important player? I think so. I think Khalil Ware might be our most important player because if he's clicking
Mm-hmm.
and Renew's clicking, it's very hard to guard the Hoosiers. Um, and then you've obviously had the very recent Lynn Sanity of Leal Sanity.
Oh wow.
That has happened, right? Where he has gone from does he even belong on this
He was
roster
a
to
zero. He was
why wasn't he playing before
he was a
this in a
walk
matter
on.
of
He was a
3 games?
glorified walk on.
I know, but he was also, Ant and I have talked about this, former Indiana Mr. Basketball. Like, so I don't understand how this even got here to this point, but irregardless, uh, we sit here now on February 7th, about a month out from Big Ten tournament time,
Yeah,
right? Just about
right.
a month. And really March getting into the swing of things. And the Hoosiers are very much on the outside looking in. Now, projecting forward, Nithin, I think this team might give us some hope. And I
Right?
think it's
Kind
hope that
of.
I think they're not actually going to make it over the hump, but they're going to get to a point where we're going to be playing Wisconsin at home and or Michigan State at home in the last game of the year, and it's going to have to be a must win. And I don't think they're going to win that game, but I think that they will somehow find a way to weasel themselves into the conversation. Forget the metrics, forget everything. Like this team has shown the ability, which previous Mike Woodson teams, by the way, haven't really shown, to actually go on a road, take a punch, and come back and win a game. Like they went and won at Michigan in a game in which they didn't
Yeah.
play their best. They went and won at Ohio State in a game.
Yeah.
Now you might say, well, hey Matt, might be two of the worst teams in the Big Ten. It doesn't matter. I've sat here and watched an Indiana team that I thought was good go on the road and lose to Minnesota. I've watched
Yeah.
a good Indiana team
Yeah.
go on the road to
Was
Penn State and get absolutely
go
smoked.
go to Fort Wayne. Go to Fort Wayne
I've
and
go to Fort
lose.
Wayne. I've watched a Sweet 16 team like struggle at
Yeah.
home against
Non-conference, whatever. Yeah.
non-conference opponents.
Yeah.
This team has an ability that even if they're on the road and they're facing some adversity to put that aside and find a way to win, and that's what they did against Ohio State.
And yeah, and never
And
mind
yeah, go ahead.
the two close calls at Wisconsin, at Illinois. Of course, Wisconsin was a double-digit loss, but Indiana did take a punch or two in that game. CJ Gunn actually may have given one. But look, Indiana, sort of dug in and sort of got back into the game, played well, didn't quit, didn't slouch, didn't pout against the Badgers. Of course, the real blockbuster afternoon, which we all didn't really expect, was Indiana going into Champaign and taking the lead and giving it up, and a stupid technical at halftime that should have never been called on Xavier Johnson. And then just like that, IU came back and took the lead, and we were just holding our breath until the end of that one. So even in some of the road losses against good teams, they're hanging in there. Of course, Saturday will be another road experience against an elite basketball team.
Experience.
And so we'll see what happens there. On one hand, Indiana, I think, could actually kind of hang around. On the other hand, I think they could lose by 50. I'm not joking. So it's a real wild ride with this team. It was funny, like here at Indiana HQ at the Hoosier Sound, we're not your typical outlet that covers Indiana basketball. And I know yesterday a lot of the big time sort of heavyweight outlets, Peacock, Indy Star, Inside the Hall, kind of went into the game yesterday, and they were all like, man, this is going to be just a horrible, regrettable, why am I even here type of experience. I think Jack Collinsworth on Peacock said, both teams desperate to find a win. And I think he even made a comment during the game, one team has to come out of here with the victory. He wasn't really selling people to buy subscriptions to watch that game yesterday. No. Meanwhile, if I was in charge of Peacock, I was actually really looking forward to the Indiana-Ohio State game yesterday.
The two desperate teams.
It's not only two desperate teams, just from an Indiana standpoint. Your toughest test of character is when nobody's watching, when it's not a big-time heavyweight showdown against the number one team. When you're not at the top of the mountain, it's when you're taking one in the chin against Penn State, and then you head onto the road, tough place to play, a little bit of a smaller crowd, is an understatement, and you show some guts. You show some fortitude. And that's all I've been asking from this team all season. It's why earlier in the year, when you drop 20-plus point decisions to UConn and to Auburn and to Purdue.
And I don't care if they're top 10 teams. I don't care.
Me neither. But there's no reason a team with these players, and I understand the roster construction isn't perfect, but there's no reason a team like this should be getting blown out repeatedly because not only does it hurt the metrics, but it shows that you don't have that backbone, that sturdiness that you need in the heat of conference play. And you saw Indiana show some of that over the last 2-3 weeks. I was so pumped to see this team come back. Obviously, we took a crazy journey along the way at halftime. I was very close to firing off some very cancelable tweets and videos, but we did not go Hoosier hysterics on everyone. We holstered the tweeter a little bit, and all I'm saying is, at the end of the game, I turned around and I said, "Wow, like even if Indiana had lost, I would have said they at least dug in and they showed some fight." And you saw the old guys step up, right? Trey Galloway stepped up. Malik Reneau, obviously, only in his second year, but he has a lot of game experience under his belt right now. And then, of course, there's Anthony Leal. And we got to talk about Anthony Leal, Matt, because this is a guy who had like 6 points in his career or something before a couple of weeks ago. And all of a sudden now, you're seeing this guy not only get playing time, but we're talking about critical minutes down the stretch of important
making critical plays
in Big Ten play. 13 points and 7 rebounds against Iowa. He followed that up with a sloppy performance against Penn State, but then 25 minutes yesterday, 6.6 boards. Not only is he capable of hitting the three, but he's a very good rebounder for a guard. You're seeing him make some scrappy plays on defense. Where was he all season, and why do you think maybe some of the other guys who got a crack in the rotation, why do you think they weren't able to channel some of what Leal is doing here over the last few games? Do you think it has staying power between now and the rest of the year?
Well, one, I can answer the last question there. Why weren't the other guys? And it's very obvious to me. One, Leal is more mature. Two, Leal actually gives a crap. Like he tweeted about it, it's about the name on the front of the jersey, right? And it's true. Like, and that's that's very endearing.
That should be that should be the motto of the basketball program.
That should be about the motto of the basketball program.
I mean, he's not the first
but
person
he
to say
lives that. No,
exactly.
This guy, Nithin, was literally sandwich league. This guy literally was Indiana Mr. Basketball, right? Like he was Indiana Mr. Basketball. He probably could have gone to any school in the state. Any school
Iowa, was it Iowa offer? I think maybe
Iowa Illinois offer.
I can check the full list, but anyway.
I mean, I'm sure if he had wanted
Big Ten interest.
Yeah. He could have gone to Purdue, could have gone to Notre Dame, Indiana State. He could have gone to any school in the state. He's Indiana Mr. Basketball, and he sat on the bench at Indiana, scored 6 total points, so a total of what, 3 years he's been on the bench for? He does nothing. He didn't complain. There was never rumors about him transferring. There was, he didn't sit out practice. He's never been a problem in the locker room. He's just done everything right and sat and waited for his opportunity. Came in the second semester of his senior year. Finally, Mike Woodson's like, you know what? I have no answers. Let me play this guy. Let me play this guy. And it worked. And it worked. And it paid off.
I'm blown away. I really am, because, he had a scholarship. And you banged your head against the wall really for the last couple of years, playing Tamar Bates and CJ Gunn. And
we're going to talk about Tamar Bates in a second when we talk about Woodson. But
you had ups and downs with these guys so much, and here's somebody who didn't even get named a captain at the start of the year for all he's gone through. And now I'm looking at this situation. I'm saying, well, shoot, he's got a COVID year next year. I'm penciling him in for 20 minutes off the bench next season. Do we put him in the starting lineup if we're unable to get a couple of transfer guards in the offseason? I mean, that's a long ways down the road, but here's somebody who, and I told you I'd bring up the list. It was, offers from Iowa, Maryland, Northwestern, Stanford, Xavier. I mean, Big Ten.
I'm pretty sure it's between IU and Stanford at the end.
I think you're right. That's what I recall as well. And this is legit. I mean, it's legitimate Big Ten high major interest. And it's funny, a few years ago, I was there in person in the game at Wisconsin during COVID crowds when he went off and scored in double digits. And then he just kind of sank into the abyss. He had one good game at home against Nebraska in Woodson's first year. And it just never formulated. And I'm watching this guy and I'm saying, he is playing with anticipation, right? He is not reacting. He is being proactive on the basketball court, not being reactive. He's being proactive. In the fast break, he looks like he knows what he's doing. 2-on-1s, 3-on-1s end up being either layups or open threes or fouls on the other team.
Yep.
Between now and the end of the season, Matt, if he doesn't get 15 plus minutes per game, I think Mike Woodson has to answer a lot of questions, because for this roster, for this team, he checks a lot of boxes. I'll tell you another player I've been a little bit impressed by beyond Trey Galloway, beyond Malik Reneau. I think Gabe Cupps is settling in just a little bit. And
He's kind of starting to figure things out.
And by no means am I saying he's going to be a first team anything or even all Big Ten anything this season. But, you know, I saw numerous defensive possessions over the last few games against, you know, decent competition. We saw how solid Penn State's guards were. We saw how good Iowa's guards were when they came into Bloomington. And, you know, you're seeing a player in his first year doing what I want to see out of a first-year player. He's getting comfortable in Big Ten environments. He's making right decisions. He had a nice open shot against Wisconsin, a huge game-winning 3 against the Hawkeyes about a week ago. I know a lot of folks, Matt. I know a lot of folks, Matt, have used the D word with Indiana basketball this year. The D word, developmental. Okay, developmental season for Indiana this year. Gabe Cupps is certainly one of the key pieces. How do you gauge Indiana's development between now and the end of the year? Gabe Cupps is going to be a key part of that. Is there anyone else you're really paying close attention to? And then you're saying, hey, look, in the offseason, you're going to have to take on a bigger role going into next year.
Well, Cupps mainly.
The answer could be no,
obvious,
by the way.
All right, yeah. Well, then the answer is absolutely nobody. And I might not, you know, be able to be allowed back in Assembly Hall after I say this, but personally, this roster, if only 4 or 5 guys return next year,
I agree completely.
I am okay with it. I'm okay with it. And I'll actually list off who I'm okay with.
Yeah, and I probably will have the same 4 or 5 guys.
Cupps,
go for it. Yep.
Galloway.
Yep.
Leal. All right.
Yep.
Those are the first 3.
Yep.
Renew. I'm not even gonna say Mbako. I'm not gonna even mutter Ware's name because he's gone to the NBA for sure.
We're just gonna set those 2 aside, right? If they want to come back,
if they want to come back, great. But I don't think they're coming back because they're moving on to bigger and better things, right, in their life. So good for them. And honestly, the surprise 5th one for me would be Sparks. I don't mind him as like a third big, right, in the rotation. I know he doesn't offer much, but you know, as a guy that can foul, as a guy who's big, brings some size, you know, good in practice, I'm sure. Those are my guys. As far as Jakai New, but he doesn't count for me because I haven't seen him play this year. But everybody else that has played, right? I'm okay. Like I'm fine if they all decide to put and a couple of them, to be honest, I'll be happy not to see in a Hoosier uniform anymore, and that makes me sad.
Yeah,
it does,
me too.
Because as a fan, like I want these guys to succeed. I don't want these guys to have to run off to bigger and better things. I don't want these guys to like have to go and do what Tamar Bates has done, which is go and figure it out somewhere else, right? I want them to figure it out here. They chose to come here, become part of the family. I want them to become part of the family. But sadly, sometimes things just don't work out. And right now, with a lot of these guys, it's just not working out. And I'll even name drop CJ Gunn. All right, he's had some fantastic moments.
I don't understand why it hasn't worked out.
I don't get it either. You know what? It might be good for everybody involved if he decides to move on. If he doesn't and he wants to stick around like Anthony Leal and try to figure it out, kudos, right? Kudos. That's good for you. But
that's not happening.
That's
like, I know that. Like,
you know, that's fine. If he decides to choose it, that's fine. But I'm saying, you know, Mr. Gunn, if you're listening to this, I'm sorry. Like I'm just.
I don't think you really have to apologize, right? Like I think part of it might just be it's not a great fit, and of course, Gunn committed to Indiana the Archie Miller era, and you know, for whatever reason, there's a lot of pressure at Indiana. There are a lot of critics at, in the fan base. If you don't give it your all, right? It doesn't matter how talented you are. If you don't pick up some basic fundamentals on defense. I mean, Mackenzie Mbaka is a great example. Earlier in the season, a lot of breakdowns. Indiana fans got all over him. I wouldn't have been surprised if Mbaka left Bloomington and never came back. But
There's
stuck
some
with
rumors
it.
about that.
Stuck with it. Hung in there. Figured some things out. You're seeing improvement now. He was on the floor in crunch time, right? Like, Indiana fans know basketball. And again, they say a lot of crazy stuff online and in person. You hear a lot of F words at Assembly Hall, and I don't love that, but they know what they're watching. You can't fool IU fans. And sometimes if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. For me, I was a big Caleb Banks fan the whole way. Like, I really thought Caleb Banks was going to be an integral part of this rotation this season. In the final year of TJD, when Indiana beat Kent State, lost to Miami, I saw Caleb make some critical plays for Indiana during Big Ten season, and I looked at that and I said, "Wow, like this upcoming year, once Trace leaves, once Race leaves, especially if a guy like Jordan Geronimo moves on, which that is what happened." I was thinking Caleb Banks is going to get 30 minutes a game. He's going to become a starter. He's going to be a game-changing player. We just haven't seen any of that. Now, if there's one player on the rotation in the roster you didn't mention, and I would say I'm giving him one more year, it is Banks. I would be curious to see Banks come back, maybe play some of that 3 role next year, some of that 4 role next year. Maybe it's the defensive system. It's a little bit tough to digest. I would like to see Caleb Banks give it one more go, but at the end of the day, Matt, like I even stretch it out to old guards like Xavier Johnson and Trey Galloway. And I know everyone's pumped about Galloway after how he played against Ohio State, and you should be pumped about that. But their play has been all over the map as far as what's taken place this season. You don't see that instinctual basketball, that anticipatory basketball that you're seeing out of Anthony Leal right now. And you really do wonder, like, in the future, as Indiana tries to build their rosters in upcoming years, right? Like, speed and strength and athleticism and skill are all important in basketball. That's not what I'm saying. But as Mike Woodson considers his roster building strategy, I think they have to reprioritize some skills that they look at. And you and I are going to talk about Mike Woodson in just a minute. But first, it's time for Who Won the Week this past week in IU sports. And folks, we're really just going to cover the whole gamut here. So much to be excited about as far as IU sports are concerned. The first guy I'm going to mention here is Cam Jones, who is going to play for the Kansas City Chiefs here on Super Bowl Sunday. He had a huge game to end the regular season for Kansas City, and it was great to see one of the superstars in the Tom Allen era on the defensive side of the ball do some big things in the NFL. The IU women's team is right in the thick of the Big Ten race as far as the regular season is concerned. I know everyone is looking forward to that massive showdown February 22nd at Assembly Hall against Caitlin Clark and the Iowa Hawkeyes. The Hoosiers basically have to win out to gain a share of the Big Ten title in the regular season and defend that crown. A lot of ball knowers may not know the fact that Indiana was the outright Big Ten women's basketball champion last year in the regular season. So, look, really looking forward to seeing the Hoosiers do some big things coming up as far as the women's basketball team is concerned. And we've got baseball and softball season around the corner. Softball starts on Thursday, the 8th, and then baseball is right around the corner as well. And the Hoosiers on the diamond are expected to have a big season after falling to Kentucky last year in the regional round and almost knocking out the Wildcats in Lexington. So a lot to look forward to as far as that's concerned. Matt and I will be here the whole way, folks. And a friendly reminder, like, subscribe to our podcast and find us for free. All you have to do is follow us on social media at Indiana HQ or at the Hoosier Sound on Twitter. If you enjoy our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. Your support really helps grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. Matt, we can talk about the roster all day, but really it all goes and ends up at the feet of Mike Woodson, who through 3 years, almost, The Hoosiers have one round of 64 loss to St. Mary's, one round of 32 loss to Miami, and barring a Big Ten tournament win, an NCAA tournament miss in year 3. There are a lot of folks now who I think are starting to really entrench their opinion as far as Mike Woodson is concerned. You either really believe he's the guy and he deserves more time and he deserves to really see this through, see this all the way through, and he'll be the guy that gets Indiana back into the second or the third week of the NCAA tournament. And then there are other folks who are really getting sick and tired of some of Woodson's coaching strategies and some of the patterns that have developed. Roster building's been a struggle. Auto subbing players like Hillel Ware and Trey Galloway when they pick up a second foul in the first half. What exactly do the assistant coaches do on this team? As you think about Mike Woodson, Matt, through almost the end of a third season, what's Mike Woodson doing well, and where is he really struggling as he coaches this men's basketball team?
Well, okay. So first off, personally, I'm out on Woodson. That is my personal opinion.
Wow.
I'm kind of over it. I think Indiana can do better than him. I like him as a human being. I don't really agree with most of his coaching philosophies. I don't really like, for instance, the auto bench rule with 2 fouls drives me insane. His inability to change the offense away from playing 2 big men. And I get it. Like, again, I just spoke about how Reneau is Indiana's best player and the most important player is Galloway. I get how I said all that, and still yet what I said can be true, which is that you got to figure out a way to kind of play smaller now in college basketball. And he's just gone and done the opposite the entire time, which is to try to play too big, which is obviously not worked. And now, we're sitting here, outside looking into the tournament in year 3, with a roster that going into the year I could have told you wasn't going to work. And I feel like they were not proactive enough in the transfer portal, trying to get the guys or trying to even convince the guys who they prioritize to come and join the team. So I'm out. But that doesn't mean he can't turn around and fix it, right? Because at the end of the day, I do think that there is a way in which this team becomes good again, and not just good again. I mean, like, legitimately, he figures out how to work his way around things. But for right now, I'm just kind of over it with him. And I'm not really optimistic, to be honest, about how things are going to unfold in the future, which really sucks because like I want to be like, oh, I'm so excited for next year. I can't wait for this to happen. But it's like, at the end of the day, that's not where I'm at right now, and I think a lot of Hoosier Nation will agree with me when I say that. Like, I know we got a 5-star recruit coming in, but it just feels like if Woodson's returning next year, I feel like it's just going to be kind of mediocre, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of,
Because
like
Indiana has
expectation
had
sucks.
5 stars before, right? Like, we've had
Of
5
course,
stars.
yeah.
I mean, what does it accomplish?
Yeah, we had 5 stars before. We've gone through this as a fan base, and we had a 5-star this year, right? We get Mbako at the end of the transfer portal / end of the recruiting period, right? And we're like, oh my God, this is going to be so good. And it's like, yeah, you went out and at this point, I think they were panicking because they're like, we need to get the best available player, which is fair, right?
Yeah.
Given the fact that can you believe what this team would look like without Mbako on it?
or Galloway, right? Like,
or Galloway, but no, Galloway wasn't a panic. Galloway
sure, that was part of the
that
core
was
core
part of
strategy.
the core strategy, and he's turned out very well. It's actually the guys that they have recruited in the past that are not working out well. We brought it up. CJ Gunn,
Old guys.
hasn't figured it out. Caleb Banks hasn't figured it out. Trey Galloway, for whatever reason, has just really regressed this
Xavier
year.
Johnson as well.
Xavier Johnson might be, personally, my least favorite IU basketball player I've ever watched.
It's crazy. Like,
And
I think
it
there are a lot of
shouldn't be
folks.
that way.
Who's mine? Huh. I was never a big Josh Newkirk fan.
I don't like Josh Newkirk either, but I
Evan
never thought
Fitzner.
Evan Fitzner might take the cake.
Yeah.
But with guys with expectations, like Xavier Johnson, he was
It's
a guy that,
toxic show.
I mean, but like that's what it's been for IU basketball the last couple of weeks, right? It's been pretty toxic, and there's no sign of it.
Couple decades.
Yeah, there's no sign of it like receding, right? Or
So
like turning around.
I'm going to defend Mike Woodson here.
All
Okay,
right, go
I'm going to
defend
have
Mike
his
Woodson.
back because okay, first of all, I don't think we can just gloss over he's a good person. Like that counts. Okay,
No, that does count for something.
Like that means a lot to have character, to know that you have somebody who's going to follow the rules, especially in the ever-changing world of social media and NIL and transfer portal. The last thing you want is to have a Tennessee situation where you're about to get hammered by sanctions. You don't want to have an investigation, right? We saw how well that went at Indiana 10, 15 years ago. So that counts.
That's true.
Where I think Mike Woodson lies here, and it's funny because like a lot of people are going, well, he's an improvement over Archie Miller. Well, better than Archie.
There are walking corpses that are better than Archie
is
Miller.
Not good enough, right? Like,
yeah,
that's the thing. It's not good enough. What I would say as far as Mike Woodson is concerned is a couple of things have to happen here. I think first and foremost, he has to completely overhaul his roster building strategy in the next month. Right? Portal opens, and Matt and I will be here every week through the end of this season, through transfer portal season, and then we'll have probably spring football to talk about. Like, we're not going anywhere. And we know that for Indiana, the biggest days of 2024 will not involve dribbling a basketball on the court, right? It's gonna all come down to once the window opens and the thousands of players put their name in the portal, who are the guys that Indiana targets? And you and I said it. Khalil Ware was part of Indiana's core strategy.
Yep.
Peyton Sparks was part of Indiana's core transfer portal strategy. Okay?
Yep.
Now, a couple years ago, the same guy at head coach prioritized Xavier Johnson and Miller Kopp. Okay? So, like, I can see a pathway here where Mike Woodson says, okay, I have a couple of forwards I can rely on in Malik Reneau, and now you have Peyton Sparks in the fold, and maybe Caleb Banks comes back. Like, honestly, like, I think that's a front court that's good enough to win. Right? Like, to win a lot of games in Big Ten play. Can you add someone here or there? Sure. But, of course, Liam McNeely is going to come in and play the three. As far as I'm concerned, Mike Woodson needs to revert back to the transfer portal strategy he had in his zero offseason before a regular season game was even played under Woodson as a head coach. It was Xavier Johnson, it was Miller Kopp, it was retaining Parker Stewart, and it was bringing on Tamar Bates.
Yeah.
Right? And now you've got a group of guys that can play potentially 5-out basketball, and you're seeing Malik Reneau develop a three-point shot. Mike Woodson established those systems as part of what he wanted to do at IU in his first press conference. That was what he talked about day one. And instead, what we've really seen is a continuation of Archie Miller basketball, except with better results, which, okay, like last season was fun, but you had a really crappy middle that you turned it around. And of course, Xavier Johnson got hurt. But what I want to see this team do now is completely overhaul the recruiting strategy. Really, really pay close attention to not only perimeter players. It's not that, okay? You can't just paint with such broad strokes. You got to get perimeter guys who are old and that can create their own shot off the bounce. And if you have three of those, that's great. Because what Mike Woodson can do is teach defense. And he can teach ball movement. Mike Woodson's strengths are in those areas. Indiana has typically been a good passing team. They've been a good defensive team. This year, as crappy as it's been, the Hoosiers have one of the best defenses in the league as far as conference play is concerned.
Yeah.
I know it's crazy, especially when you saw the Penn State game or the Wisconsin game, but I use defense when you look at the advanced metrics, the effective field goal percentage, the 3-point percentage allowed. the way Indiana's closing out on shooters. You saw it repeat itself yesterday in the second half. Like Indiana's defense actually continues to deliver even into Woodson's third season. But from what I'm concerned, you have to overhaul the type of players that you target in the portal. And I think Mike Woodson needs to change about a couple of the assistants on this staff.
I agree with you.
Like,
I think there's to save his job.
We need a collegiate head, an assistant with previous collegiate head coach experience on this staff ASAP. Perhaps Chris Holtman.
That's not a bad shout, TBH.
Shout out. Hey, the last Ohio State coach to get fired ended up being an assistant for us in Thad Matta, and Thad Matta's parlayed that into some great, some improvement of the Butler.
We've had a lot of former Ohio State head coaches.
You can pick about 40 guys, okay?
Yeah.
You can pick about 40 guys. I understand Kenya Hunter has played a significant role in recruitment. Mike Davis, Tom Crean. I mean, look, there are about 40 guys you can pick. I'm not kidding. Like, somebody that has been a head coach at the collegiate level, please step up. And I don't know. Honestly, like I think Kenya Hunter maybe deserves a head coach interview or two. And I wouldn't be surprised if Yasir Roseman got an assistant coach interview or two. All I'm saying is I don't know if Mike Woodson even has to fire anyone. All I'm saying is at the end of the day, we need somebody that has been a head coach at the Division I level on this staff, because there are way too many breakdowns that take place with this team because they're young players that are 18 to 21 years old. I mean, even yesterday in the middle of the game, like Mackenzie Mbako and Anthony Walker, like they're getting back on defense, and it's just like they're sort of taking a half step back, right? Like it's not all clicking for them. And then there are some moments where you go, wow, this is awesome. This is great. This is amazing. They're doing a great job. It's a lot of ups and downs. It's very volatile. It's very inconsistent. And so not only do I want Woodson to overhaul the portal strategy, change at least one, I'm hoping for 2 assistants. The last thing I'm going to say here, like I do want to see what it looks like when someone other than Xavier Johnson is running the point. And we saw what it was like when Jalen Hood-Schifino did it. And it looked really nice. And Indiana won a lot of games. And they swept Purdue. And they swept Illinois. And they swept a floundering Michigan team. And they looked like somebody that, they looked like a basketball team that was cohesive and played with explosiveness. They couldn't rebound for crap in the tournament, but we'll overlook that point.
Right.
All I'm saying is if you do a few of those things, I think Mike Woodson steers us back in the right direction pretty quickly, especially considering Liam McNeely joins the core, the forces next year. I know that was a lot. I
agree with you.
But I can also see a point where Woodson gets forced out. I mean, Indiana's never going to fire Mike Woodson, right?
No, it's the same. I've been talking to Michigan basketball fans about this. I'm not sure you can fire Jawan, right? Given everything that he's done with the Fab Five and that whole debacle, like I don't see them firing him, right? But they could be like, hey, we are going to fire you, or you can just decide to leave on your own, right? Like, like that's totally acceptable. And we won't blame you, and we'll thank you on the way out and give you hugs and kisses and a nice pat in the back.
Yeah, we'll bring you back to the arena.
Exactly.
Right.
And I think they could do that with Woodson, because I think if you're looking at the future of the program and the guys that are currently available out there, as bad as it sounds, there is a head coach out there that might be from my state who is an instant upgrade of not only just Mike Woodson, but an instant upgrade over almost any other head coach in the country. Right?
Florida.
Yeah.
By the Atlantic.
By the Atlantic, yes. And might have been, a former manager. Right? Like that is what I'm talking about here. And
Justin Timberlake, right? It's gonna be May.
Justin Timberlake. It's gonna be big. So
it's gonna be May. It's gonna be May. It's a song.
Is it? Is it a song? I don't know that song. I don't know. I'm too young for that.
Yeah. Wow.
Sorry, I didn't mean to dig
That's
you.
fine.
That was rude. That was rude.
Whew.
But
Sorry.
anyways, uh, I think the obviously that guy's out there, right? And if he was offered the job, I think it would be very surprising if he said no to me, right? Given his history with the program, it's probably his dream job, and I get like he's got kids.
What do you think Dusty May would do differently at Indiana?
Well, I think he would take more of a must, coach must
Compared
strategy
to Woodson, right? Yeah.
compared to Woodson. Like I think, he's found his head coaching success in building rosters with guys from the portal, right? Like Johnny Davis,
Sure.
That whole Elijah Martin, that whole team is basically transfers, right?
Sure.
And he plays a style of basketball.
They take a lot of threes.
They take a lot of threes that really fits the way that Indiana should always play basketball, right? Like it's honestly the perfect fit. Guard heavy. They shoot a bunch of threes. They got a European big man that does all the work.
Vlad Goldin, yeah.
Vlad Gold, yeah. Like I like the makeup of his team, and even the guys that come off the bench for that team. Like it just makes sense. They have roles. Everybody on that team has a role. Like he has created a roster where everybody. I can't tell you what half the people's roles are on this IU team. I don't know. I genuinely have no idea what their role is. And I'm pretty sure if you ask them what their role is, there's no set role, right? It's like for CJ Gunn, he's not the sixth man, right? Going into this year, we were hoping that
instigator. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Like what? Even Anthony Leal, who's come in and done very well. What is Anthony Leal's role? You're not exactly trying to get shots for him from three. Like it so happens in games, right? But he's not like getting a play drawn up for him, so that's not his role. He's out there to go get rebounds and play like
energy and
somewhat high level defense. But is that a role? No, what is a role? Right. No, like Trey Galloway. What is Trey Galloway's role? Right? Is he the main guard?
It's funny, like, because once Cups picked up his fourth yesterday, with about 7 minutes left, Galloway, I think, figured out what he had to do on the court. He had to be Indiana's point guard.
Yes, but when Cups is on the floor, he doesn't know what his role is.
Is he a two guard? Is he a point? Is he defense?
The only two people on the team that know their role in and out is Reneau and Ware. Those are the only two people. Even when Xavier Johnson's in, who's supposed to be our best player, right? And he's the fifth oldest player in college basketball.
Captain.
And the captain has no idea. Every time he's out on the court, I watch this. He has no idea what his role is. He's the point guard, right? So he's supposed to lead the offense.
But is he trying to score with the basketball?
Is he trying to score with the basketball?
Is he trying to post feed?
Is he trying to post feed the entire time? Is he a shooter? Is he not a shooter? They don't know. There's no cohesiveness about role. He's definitely not a shooter. And again, that's one of my gripes with Woodson is Woodson has decided to keep him around. But he is just the opposite of what this team needs. Right? They don't need a facilitator. TBH.
Because Woodson's a really good teacher as it relates to making the game easier for some of his players.
You don't need a facilitator on the team because you have Trey Galloway, who can run point.
And you saw someone like Trace Jackson Davis become a better passer at Indiana. Same with Race Thompson under Mike Woodson.
A good passer.
Gabe Cubs is facilitating pretty well. Trey Galloway, like Woodson's strength is teaching that stuff. So go get a guy who can eat buckets for lunch.
Yeah. Yeah. So you know what? I was super excited this summer when we were linked with Caleb Love. Because that's a guy who, if he learns how to facilitate a ball at the high level, as good as he is at scoring the basketball, and a guy who can shoot from the outside and can command an offense and has played in a championship game, right? Like those guys don't come around all that often.
No, well, what's funny though is like you actually look around and it's going to be the same way in the portal this year.
Mhm.
Like there were a lot of guys available who could do this. Like Max Asmus, right? He went to Texas, right?
Yep.
You could have thrown your hat in the ring, seen where
Could
that
have tried.
seen where
Yeah.
that took you. It didn't happen. Okay, you tried with Dalton Connect and Jordan Dingle. Okay, swung and missed, fine, but the good process there. I respected the process.
Yeah.
But I even look at a team like Wake Forest, who is creeping up into the upper echelon of the ACC. They went out and got a guy named Boopy Miller from the MAC,
Yeah,
right?
Boopy. Yes.
And this dude is out there and he's a 6'2" guard. And he's just gone out there and he's playing within himself, but late in the shot clock, he goes out there for Wake, and he's really in that prototype of one of those players who, for a 9 seed Wake Forest, scores 30 points and beats a 1 seed.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, he is. Yes.
And that's the type of player. Like,
Yes.
even if you're not getting the top of the line scoring guard, Caleb Love, Max Ace, right? Like, there are so many players.
But Indiana can get the top of the line guys because their NIL is so
And
good.
that's the
So
thing.
that's the thing. Yeah. And I was reading somewhere, I forget where I was reading this. It might have been The Athletic, but they were talking about IU and their inability to get the transfer portal guards in. And somebody, again, I forget who I read this from, but this was a real article.
Yeah.
They mentioned that the recruits or the potential transfers were worried about the team having Trey Galloway and Xavier Johnson
Of
on the
course.
roster,
I'd be worried too.
which drove me insane. Because, like, I get the Trey Galloway thing, but Xavier Johnson has been outside of
It's
really
crazy.
like what one like a
It was
half of
like it
Big
was like a
Ten
12 it was like
play.
a 12 games. It was like a 12 game stretch at the end of
Yeah,
his first year
at
at
the end
Indiana.
of his first year, has been, quite frankly,
Unreliable, right?
unreliable,
Yeah.
unreliable, so to think that some of these guards couldn't compete with him, huh?
Yeah. Well,
Like,
it's like, to me, it's almost like an NFL team, right? When they give a 3 or a 4 or a 5 year contract to a mediocre quarterback, right? Like the
yeah,
Saints tied themselves to Derek Carr, or the Rams tied themselves to Jared Goff. Now, of course, Goff had a really good season with the Lions, but like when you tie yourself such a, the Niners and Jimmy G, I believe that's what happened there too. Like when you tie yourself to a mediocre quarterback in football or an average point guard in basketball, you're stuck.
you're screwed.
Like,
For lack of better words, you are screwed.
you
And
know,
and Indiana has been stuck with guys, and they've been screwed since Yogi Ferrell left. TBH.
well, and
You
that's the
you
crazy
go
thing,
get
Matt,
Josh. I'm tired of getting point guards from
because
Pittsburgh.
back
Pittsburgh.
to
I
the
never want to get another point guard. I Josh Newkirk and now Xavier.
now
I'm done. I'm done. I'm
now
done. I never want to.
ball knowers will know though that Jalen Hood-Schifino is from Pittsburgh, but he didn't go to the
He didn't go Pitt. He was committed
right.
to Pitt. He
Yeah.
never actually. He didn't get infected by Pitt basketball. So
From the city though, from the
yeah,
city. Yeah.
that's fine. I mean, he
Yeah.
didn't get
That's okay.
infected
Right.
by Pitt basketball. I'm sick
Close.
and tired.
Almost got there.
I'm sick and tired of Indiana stealing from Pitt. They can keep it. They can keep their players.
That's really funny.
And like I root for Xavier Johnson as hard as anybody else does. And
Yeah.
I say that he's my least favorite player because he's so frustrating because I can
It is.
see
He had the
I
Ohio
can
State
see
game this year.
yeah, I can see he shows glimpses of being a top tier guard. And then he goes and is just mid for the next like 5 games in a row and does his really, really stupid and insecure and just immature antics. And then it's come back to bite him in the butt because now he gets called against Illinois. That stupid technical, it should never been called technical. They called it technical because he's done stupid things in the past.
Yeah.
And he has a reputation of doing like these kind of players.
It's a headache.
Like it feels like, and I saw somebody, kind of say that the Indiana basketball and Nebraska football
Ooh.
comparison is so apt. It's like unbelievably apt. In certain ways. And one of the ways is you've just Indiana has somehow attracted some players who in the past, if Bob Knight's here, right, and Xavier Johnson was on this roster, you think Xavier Johnson's doing anything that he's doing right now? Absolutely not. Or he's running 19,000 laps around Assembly Hall in front of 25,000 spectators, right? Like that's not happening. Under a Bob Knight ran team, like the
But it's also
mediocre.
not happening. Like it's also not happening on a Matt Painter team or a Bill Self team, right?
Oh
Like
yeah, no,
Tommy
any.
Lloyd team.
Well, I wouldn't go as far as saying Bill Self. I mean, Bill Self has gotten some players in that program that probably don't even deserve to be playing college
But
basketball.
even
I'm
like
looking at Ontario Morris, but like,
bleh, bleh.
yeah, exactly. But like, yeah, again, Greg Gard,
Yeah, Greg Gard, Greg
Greg Gard
McDermott,
team,
right?
Greg
Creighton.
McDermott.
Yeah,
Yeah, like any
they're
coach
not
that
playing.
yeah, no. And so when he goes out there and does the family jewels grab and then plays the next game, that was alarming to me. TBH. Like, I don't know. I don't care if he's 24 years old. Like, consequences are consequences for what you do, and you can't run a program where a guy who is your captain, third year of the program, fifth oldest player in college basketball, goes out and decides to, check out somebody's family jewels. Like, you can't have that in your program. Like, I'm sorry. That shouldn't be a thing.
No, it shouldn't. Now, I will say one thing I don't want to see Indiana do is try to replicate what Purdue and UConn have done in the portal, right? This offseason. So what did Purdue do? Purdue looked at their roster and said, wow, like we have a really good team. We got to plug one weakness. And that was let's go out there and get an athletic guard like Lance Jones to elevate our team to another level.
Mm-hmm.
Indiana, I think, needs to do something like a totally 180-degree different
Scorched
strategy.
earth. Scorched earth is what
Yeah.
needs to happen.
Like Connecticut went out and they got Cam Spencer, right? Like
you can't Indiana can't replicate that, Nithin.
it's
Why?
those are teams that needed to plug in one spot, one weakness. Don't go
Because
out there.
why?
Yeah, because they
Why?
established a foundation.
Because they established foundation and we're already winning. We are not winning.
Exactly.
We're not beating top teams. UConn just won the national championship. Purdue was a 1 seed last year.
Right.
Like, we're going to miss the tournament.
They knew the one thing they had to fix. Wisconsin, they missed the tournament, right? And I think they're an interesting case because, right, now we look at Wisconsin. Now they might lose to Michigan here tonight, but this is a Badgers team that went out and they sort of revamped what they wanted, right? They went out and they got AJ Storr, and AJ Storr is somebody you can create a shot off the bounce. But then they didn't stop there. It was, hey, John Blackwell, welcome to the program, freshman, right? And okay, you can say, well, if Liam McNeely has the impact that John Blackwell has next season, we're getting somewhere. But then they also, tweaked their style of play. Wisconsin is one of the best offenses in the country. Okay, they don't play the end Bo Ryan basketball. It's not bogged down. They're up and down the floor. They're athletic. They can play with 2 bigs if they want. They can play with 4 guards if they want. Right. And so you've got to take a look at that Badgers team as an example of a team where they missed the tournament last year, but they did a lot of self-scouting, a lot of self-evaluation, and they weren't content with just one move. They overhauled their backcourt. Let's go AJ Storr. Let's go John Blackwell. Let's also establish, keep some established guys like Crowell and Wall and Hepburn. And now you're getting somewhere.
I'm starting to hear something very similar for how Indiana can look to build their roster going into next year. Right? Again, Wisconsin, last year, they missed the tournament, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah. Lost to Khalil Ware in the NIT.
Yeah, lost to Khalil Ware in the NIT. That's right. Missed the tournament last year. They decided to go scorched earth, go get a whole new backcourt, right? And plug in some of the guys from the previous year team into the starting lineup, and boom, you all of a sudden have a what? They're looking at like a 3 seed, 4 seed. I mean,
You know,
Indiana's not that far off. They're not that far off, as bad as it seems,
but
right?
you can't go to bed at night saying we're really close. Like
No,
you've got to go scorched earth, as
yeah,
you said. That's what Indiana's strategy has to be this upcoming off season, which again, it's only about 6 weeks away. But folks, real quick, let's do a social media shout out. We're gonna give a tip of the cap to our channels where the masses continue to follow us and keep on growing. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at Indiana HQ, as well as at the Hoosier Sound. On Instagram, Matt, we're not Indiana HQ, but what are we?
Indiana dot period dot HQ.
You can find us there. Again, we're your one-stop shop for IU sports. So whatever you want to know about pros doing big things, Hoosier swimmers and divers qualifying for the Olympics, which just happened recently.
Mhm.
The men's basketball team, women's basketball team. Kurt Signetti gave a press conference earlier today on the football side. We're all you need, and you'll be the smartest person in your Valentine's Day dinner. And so that's really what we prioritize here at the Hoosier Sound. Matt, obviously this big rivalry showdown on Saturday night. Purdue hosts the Hoosiers. Fox
Mhm.
wanted to pick this one up, and so Hoosiers will head to Mackey Arena for an 8 p.m. Eastern tip on Saturday night. We'll see what ratings are like. I don't know if it'll top last year's epic primetime game in West Lafayette.
Yeah.
Part of me thinks this could be a 78-46 final. We'll get there though. Hold on, we'll talk about this matchup a little bit more. Purdue is 21-2, the runaway favorite in the Big Ten. They have been absolutely outstanding this year. Zach Edey's a superstar, will likely win National Player of the Year. Well, I said runaway. I mean, they're a game up in the loss column on Illinois and Wisconsin, but as many of you know, Purdue beat Illinois at Mackey Arena. They beat
Yeah.
Wisconsin at Kohl Center. Matt, like this is going to be the most difficult game on IU schedule. If they win, it'll be the best win in college basketball. So as you look at this game, what are you looking forward to as the Hoosiers take on the Boilermakers Saturday night?
I just want to see some fight. I could care less if they win this game, TBH, because I don't I just genuinely don't believe that they could. Right? There's not an ounce of belief in my body that they could somehow have a Jalen Hood Shafino moment. It's not going to happen.
Edey would have to get hurt. I think that's what would
There was a lot of I think even if Edie got hurt, I don't think this team would beat Purdue. I
Really?
think I think Braden Smith and Lawyer and the rest of the crew would just take over. Um, and honestly, if you're asking me my personal opinion, as crazy as this might sound, I think Purdue's offense is more dynamic when they have like Caleb First or TKR down there, because then they can play 5 out, right?
Well,
Because Edie's always in the paint. Semicolon, however, comma, Edie is one of, if not the best player in college basketball. So, beggars can't be choosers. But that being said, I'm just sitting here. I hope that they just show some fight. They're not going to win the game. I think even the most delusional IU fans don't think that, right? You'd be crazy to believe that at this point, and given what's happened, and then obviously given what happened the last time these two teams played.
yeah.
But it doesn't mean that miracles can't happen.
Anthony Leal was out that night.
That's right. That's our carry was out. That's right. Our carry. No, but he could offer some sort of boost, right? Can you imagine if Anthony Hill starts hitting threes in Mackey? Like the confidence of the team is going to go through the roof. They start seeing their senior leader, guy who was on the bench, not even playing 6 weeks ago, going to Mackey Arena. He hits 2 threes in a row. You don't think that, everybody's going to start thinking that they can shoot, right? So it really only does take like 1 or 2 shots for this team to really believe that they can do this. I'm not sure they're going to have the fouls for Edey, because again, you thought Purdue got calls in Assembly Hall. Wait till you watch them get calls in Mackey, because they shoot the most free throws out of, I think, almost every single Division I program at home. And they're that or they're in the top 10. I can't remember the statistic, but they lead the country in free throws shot at home. So I mean, you're gonna have to throw bodies at it again. You're gonna need all 5 fouls, I think, from Sparks this game. I think you're gonna need probably one or if not
Caleb
both
Banks.
of.
Caleb Banks.
I mean, you're gonna throw. I mean, Caleb Banks, he's not gonna play, but one if not both of Malik Reneau and Ware might foul out. So you're gonna have to find something somewhere.
Yeah, I think you covered it off pretty nicely. The Boilermakers are an absolute juggernaut at home. They did come to Indiana and beat the Hoosiers in Bloomington 87 to
I'm really worried,
66.
Nithin, I'm really worried that Purdue ends up in like the double bonus with like 12 minutes left in the first half.
Hey, now
Like that's very much gonna happen this game.
two is less than three.
That's true.
So if you make them shoot, 70 free throws, that means they're gonna have a tough time getting off 3-point attempts. And take that. Yeah. Ever think of that? Matt Gaynor.
I just hope Ethan Morton plays more minutes. That's all I'm saying.
For what it's worth, folks, Purdue will have some extended rest going into this game on Saturday.
Yeah.
They won at Wisconsin on Sunday, and they didn't have a midweek game. So nice full 6 days to rest and recuperate before they play Indiana on Saturday night. Minnesota
I'm so happy
on
for them, Pukes.
Thursday, and then easy stretch to end February for the Boilermakers. But as I look at this, Matt, right, for me, a lot of this is taking away some valuable, important, productive lessons Saturday night into what is a pretty manageable schedule the rest of the way. Now, what's interesting is Ken Pom doesn't have the Hoosiers favored in any game between now and the end of the year.
Ken Pom hasn't liked us the whole season. In fact,
understandably,
I am starting the motion that Indiana HQ should unsubscribe from Ken Pom for this anti-Ken Pom bias.
Wow.
I am tired of having this Ken Pom account in our name. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, it makes sense why.
Yeah, but with that said, right, like Indiana is like a 45% win probability in a bunch of games coming up, right? And if you can go into Mackey Arena and show some backbone and show some fight and make some shots and play the type of defense that you played over the last 8 minutes of the Ohio State game, even if you lose by 15, you can take some valuable lessons from that into a home game against Northwestern after a week off, into a home game against Nebraska, a road rematch with Penn State. You've got a home game against Wisconsin, but then back-to-back road trips to Maryland and Minnesota before wrapping up at home against Michigan State. Again, nothing easy there, but all of a sudden you might see 45% games become 50% games or 55% games. And that's all that we're looking for from this Hoosiers team between now and the end of the year. Who cares about playing for Indiana University? Right? Like, who actually takes that personally?
Who wants to be on the team next year?
And if you're Kalel Ware or Mackenzie Mbako, you've got millions and millions and millions of dollars on the line.
Yeah.
Each and every time you step out onto the court. Jalen Hood-Schifino was a first-round pick because of this game on Saturday night.
Mm-hmm.
So if Mackenzie Mbako wants to become a first-round pick next year, or he wants a first-round grade next year, show them what you got, man.
He's got Saturday to prove it.
Rebound the ball, defend your tail end off, hit some threes, and show people what you're capable of. And that's what it all comes down to. So I'm really paying attention to seeing what Indiana's character is like, what their toughness is like, what their pride level is like. And even if you do go down by 20 at halftime, can you show some resolve in the second half and chip away, make it a 15-point game, make it a 10-point game, force Matt Painter to use a timeout that he doesn't want to use, right? Like, those are the type of victories you have to look at when you are going to go into a game as probably a 20-point underdog And I would be surprised if it wasn't that much, frankly, for Saturday night. So curious to see what the sports books think. We'll see that number come out Friday midday or maybe Friday evening. But Matt, as you see this, the Hoosiers will obviously try to shock the world on Saturday night. But
Yeah.
crazier things that happen. It's college basketball, right?
Yeah.
Who do you think wins this game in Mackey Arena on Saturday night, and by how much?
Purdue. Purdue's gonna win on Saturday night by like, we'll say 10. You know what?
Ooh.
I believe the team will keep it
Okay.
within arm's length. I feel like this is the kind of game where Indiana could get off to a hot start, like they have in previous games, let up the lead, kind of go in at halftime down 15, come back, make a little bit of a comeback like they did in the last game, and then just not quite get it over the hump. So it's going to be painful, but promising.
It's kind of the story for IU basketball.
The season, yeah,
It's
it really is. That is the story of this team, and it will continue to be the story because
yeah, that's exactly.
and that ain't changing anytime soon. TBH.
I think Purdue wins this game by 40.
I also wouldn't be surprised by that either.
104-64 on Saturday night.
That's a bad look. That is a bad look for the program if that's the case, by the way. That is just a terrible, terrible look. Losing, I'm fine with, but losing by that much on national television is never a good look, ever.
I hope I'm wrong. We'll see. But as you and I have talked about here, really looking forward to seeing the process, how the Hoosiers play, because there are some very interesting, winnable home games coming up. Even though you're facing good teams, Northwestern, Nebraska, Wisconsin may all see themselves announced in the field. In fact, probably should at this point.
Yep.
Can you beat them at home? Why not?
By the way, what a job Fred Hoiberg's done at Nebraska, right? They gave him time to work through it, and now he finally has a team.
Well, and it's not just like he was doing the same thing over and over again, right?
No.
You're talking about Bryce Williams coming into the fold. He's been an impactful wing. He broadened his horizons and brought in Rink Mast, played the center as a stretch five. He's been very effective. Of course, he had the shot-making ability of Tominaga and Wilcher. It's been very, very helpful. You don't have just one guy who can create a shot. You got two. Guys. And then Josh Alec comes in, plays with energy. You got to have all these different pieces on your basketball team in order to take that next step. So Fred Hoiberg doesn't need more time, right? He's a college basketball coaching savant. He's already been there and done that at Iowa State. But in the modern day, revising and overhauling your strategy on the fly, that's exactly how you take a team like Wisconsin or Nebraska from out of the field and into the field. So that's what we're looking forward to seeing Indiana do. Matt, as we wind up here on this Wednesday night, any final thoughts from your end here as we talk more about this men's basketball team?
All right, last thing about Woodson. I don't know how, I don't know why Anthony Leal hasn't played for the last 3 years. If you've asked any of the players behind the scenes, if you've watched them talk about Anthony Leal, I saw Miller Kopp comment about it. I'm like, this is the least surprising thing ever that he's doing this.
Like Trace loved him. Trace Jackson
Davis loved him. Race like all the leaders from the previous last two teams absolutely adored him. So I don't understand why he hasn't played when we've been struggling with shooting this entire time. And honestly, you talked about him playing some mediocre defense at home against Penn State. I don't even think he was that bad, TBH. I think that his defense is better than half the other guys that play. So it's not that he's unathletic. He works his butt off and he can shoot. So that to me alone is the biggest question mark about Mike Woodson. How he's sat on and watched him in practice and had him sit at the end of the bench for 3 years, only to be like, wait, I can use him. What? What are we doing here, guys? Like, what are we doing? There's some things, maybe it's the assistant staff didn't believe in him. Okay, well then that leads into Nithin's comment about possibly needing some new assistants on this team, which possibly is not really the word that I would go with, which is most definitely is what I would say. So I'm not sold on it, and I think that they have an opportunity to go and get somebody like a Dusty May here. And so be it if that happens or it doesn't happen, whatever. But like I want people to know that if Mike Woodson does succeed, that I'm extremely happy.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's not like I'm rooting against the guy.
Right.
It's just that I currently, as things stand, don't really believe. I'm not a believer, right? Like if he decides to become Santa Claus again, I'll believe. But right now I bah humbug.
For me, I would say I was in Cole Center a couple weeks ago. Charlie and I stayed close to this basketball team this year. I was in there. I was in person at Madison Square Garden for the UConn game. And I see all of you engage with us online. And again, it continues to reinforce in my mind, like this program really is nothing without its fan base. Like it really, really is absolutely nothing without its fans. And it's why people use we, right? When they talk about a team, because players come and go, coaches come and go.
We stay. We're still
we
here.
Stay.
Yeah.
And the Hoosier fans that stick with this team as they, roll towards possibly, if best case, an NIT berth. This fan base deserves everything. And we'll see. We'll see what Mike Woodson does here as far as his portal strategy. You can afford to have one crappy year. Once you start getting a second, you're venturing into Juwan Howard territory, right? And that's a guy that made the Elite Eight, the Final Four, or whatever recently. Like he's actually done a lot of what Indiana fans want their next coach to do. But
Tom Crean won 2 Big Ten titles in 3 seasons.
Yeah,
and then was fired a year after that.
And now college sports very different now compared to even the Crean era or the Archie era. But look, like this is where it is now, and you got to make sure that you deliver for this fan base, because there were vocal supporters in Madison, New York City. I heard them last night in Columbus. IU fans travel, they support the team, and as Anthony Leal said, you're doing it for the name on the front of the jersey. So very, very curious to see how this team finishes this season and what they do as far as the first couple of weeks of the offseason is concerned, because things can change very quickly in this game. But folks, thank you for joining us here on episode 321 of the Hoosier Sound. We really appreciate your support. To hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today, be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound to make sure you don't miss any in the future. You can also go to our website, indianahq.com, to find it all in one place. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we will see you next time.
Peace and love, go Hoosiers.